Mark, I need you to listen up to Raider Nation here. And every single person, I have been told that Mark Davis, the Raiders, they watch this YouTube channel. They watch a lot of Raiders content creators' YouTube channels. So I'm trying to break a comments record here. The most comments that I have ever gotten on a show that I have done here, 5,000 comments. So if you come across this video, spam HireAP. I'm going to send it to Mark Davis. I'm going to send it to the Raiders, and I want to show them that we want AP to be the Raiders head coach. Coming up here on the Raiders Report, I'm Mitchell Renz. This is Chat Sports. What the is Mark Davis doing? Is he really not going to hire Antonio Pierce? And I know there's been a lot of speculation of whether or not the rumors are true that there's a little bit of a, we'll call it a kink in the hose, a little bit of a snag in the chain of whether or not the Raiders are going to hire Antonio Pierce, because a lot of people were reporting on Monday, were reporting on Tuesday that this is AP's job. And now it's a little bit silent and people are starting to worry. Why? Well, I'm going to tell you exactly why you should be a little bit worried of Mark Davis going with somebody else not named Antonio Pierce. What do I always say? Where there's smoke, there's fire. And I'm telling you right now, there is a lot of There's a lot of smoke going on around Mike Vrabel, because according to reports, Tom Brady wants the Raiders to hire Vrable. And he's one of the dudes right now talking to Mark Davis. And why I get nervous about this is because every single year there is somebody that Mark values more than the rest. And if that person turns out to be Tom Brady, well, he might end up going with Vrabel. I will admit that Vrabel today, it was reported that he is going to be meeting with the Los Angeles Chargers for their head coaching job. It also seems like the Chargers are literally interviewing everybody. David Shaw, Jim Harbaugh, Ed Dodsley just interviewed. But as it stands, a reason there's a holdup right now is because of the conversations between Tom Brady and Mark Davis, because all the players, the Raiders organization, they want to go champ, they want to go AP. Here's the thing though, man. Several content creators were contacted by Raiders players yesterday to get hashtag HireAP going. And you can believe that if you want. You can say what you want. I'm telling you, for Raiders players to reach out to content creators that they believe have a voice, that they believe can get this message out, because for them, they don't want to take the chance, right? They've already feel like they have done their part, telling Mark that this is the route that we want to go. Well, now we got to get the nation to rally behind it. So I'm serious when I tell you, if you want the Raiders to hire Antonio Pierce, I need a HireAP down below. So let's kind of go through this Raiders timeline of over the past, we'll call it, 72 hours of this waiting game. Like, I feel like I am the Pablo Escobar gif of waiting on Antonio Pierce to be hired. And I'm kind of getting sick and tired of this waiting game. So it was reported that the Raiders were expected to hire AP Champ Kelly. This was on Monday, and it's when all the pictures of AP, Kelly, Richard Seymour, they're kind of all hugging out. Antonio Pierce had a second interview. He's got a Raiders jacket on national television. Adam Schefter reported it. Ian Rappaport reported it was all signs pointing to AP. Then I'd say there was a legit 24 hours of nothing. We didn't hear anything. It was crickets. Crickets. Then there's Chris Richard interview. Now the Raiders can hire literally anybody that they want. They have, done the Rooney Rule. They can hire a GM. They can hire a head coach. A little bit more silence. Then there was a report from Mike Florio on Wednesday. And the report from Florio on Wednesday indicated everything that I kind of just talked about here with Tom Brady, talking to Mark Davis, trying to hype up of, hey, we need to consider Mike Vrabel over Antonio Pierce. So when you have that report laid out, and then you think of, all right, here's everything looks like it's going in one direction. Then there's silence. What does silence usually mean? Some sort of disagreement. Then there's the report from Florio, which was this. The word on the NFL streets over the weekend was when you start connecting dots, Vrabel to the Raiders. Tom Brady intimately involved in the team, even though his attempt to purchase 5 to 10% of the franchise is yet to be approved by the owners. And it might never be, but Tom Brady, is involved, and he and Vrabel are tight. So for those that don't know, Mike Vrabel, Tom Brady, they obviously played a little bit of football together, But also, like, when you bring in a guy like Vrable, I don't really want to sit up here and say, like, I think of Vrable as the Patriot way, and I'll kind of talk about what type of coach I think Vrable is. But the bigger thing is you can't go away from what your players want. So then several players reached out to beat writers. I am not going to reveal who those beat writers were, though I have seen enough messages, I have seen enough text, and then the one person that put out an article today, shout out to Hondo Carpenter, on some text messages that he received from some Raiders players was this: what is Mark Davis going to do? Please tell me he won't F this up. I love Mark. I can't see him doing this. Another anonymous Raiders player to Hondo Carpenter. Is he going to do this to us twice? WTF. No way that man Mark knows us, understands us. I don't see it. He one of us. Now, I'll kind of go into what one player sent me and one of the reasons why I kind of jumped on the whole HireAP train late last night. But if you don't think that what is being reported by Florio is legit, then you're not honestly all that well connected. It should give you that little bit of a butterfly feeling, because I don't know about you, it's giving me a nervous feeling right now because I just don't know if I trust Mark Davis to make the right decision. And then the last one is players reached out to content creators. There was a reason why Graphic Raider Wasted were live yesterday talking. Then I sat down and I talked to the guys. I put out all my stuff that I did. Then I had one Raiders player tell me this: you got to make sure Mark knows we want AP. Like, for me, for players to reach out to content creators is one thing. For players to reach out and talk to beat reporters, that's one thing. For a player the caliber of a Maxx Crosby, Davante Adams, to step up on TV in front of everybody, an interview, press conference, and say, we want Antonio Pierce. I am telling you right now, from top to bottom, that entire locker room wants Antonio Pierce. And the quotes you saw from Hondo, not going to tell you the player, but I know y'all like that player very, very much. So to make sure that you never miss anything going on around the Las Vegas Raiders, click that subscribe button, turn on those notifications, because the Raiders are a roller coaster. This is the most excited offseason I have been in a very long time. And to be honest, I don't think anything's going to change in that. Why? Because I was so let down having Josh McDaniels of, as long as you don't totally F it up in the hiring process, I'm going to be okay. But if you bring in AP, this is going to be the most excited your fan base has been. And I don't know how long, man. And I don't know how you could possibly rip that away from your fan base, considering everything Mark Davis, this Raiders organization, put us through the past 2 seasons. So coming up here is going to be players that will be traded if the Raiders don't hire Antonio Pierce. There are 3 names, and I should say I'm very confident that they are going to be traded. And I'll kind of get into why each of those players ends up getting moved, but it's all 3 players that the nation wants on this team. It's all 3 players that if you don't want these 3 guys on your team, you simply don't know ball. If you think, you know what, Mitch, I know ball pretty well, well, hey, go put your money where your mouth is. Shout out to today's sponsor, Prize Picks. And if there's anybody out there that wants to get started with our awesome sponsor here, it is Daily Fantasy Sports made easy. There is a reason why Prize Picks is the #1 daily fantasy sports app in the entire world. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS to make sure that you use code CLNS for a first-time deposit match up to $100. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Prize Picks is really simple to play. I can pick my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. So again, use code CLNS at prizepicks.com/CLNS. As you can see down below, Chug just put it for you guys in the live comment section. Also, it's going to be in the description of today's show. For our Saturday playoff slate, I'm going to go less on Brock Purdy passing yards. Give me the more on C.J. Stroud passing yards. And then I'm going to go more on George Kittle receiving yards. 10 to win 50. Sounds like a pretty darn good deal to me. In fact, like, if I was a parent and I want, not that I'm going to teach my kids, you know, hey, let's go put some money down on some NFL games. But I'll tell you this right now, I would teach my kids what football is based on Prize Picks and the idea of, all right, honey, let's sit down. All right, son, let's sit down. Let's watch a game. All we care about today is C.J. Stroud getting the more. I can watch a football game with my son, my daughter. Hell, I watch him with Chuck, and he's cheering for the more. Bottom line is it's money well spent, and you have a chance to win more. If you're somebody out there that's like, oh, man, I love these duck races, why do you do it? Because you have a good time doing it, and on top of that, you have a chance to win money. So please go get started with our sponsor, Prize Picks. All right, y'all, coming up here, players that will be traded or likely traded if the Raiders do not hire Antonio Pierce. For me, there are 3 names come to mind, and the way that this is going to work is it's going to be a domino effect. It's going to be, as soon as the first domino falls, it's going to be another domino, and it's going to be another domino, and this is just 3. I bet you there would be even more based on the players that I have talked to. The first player is this. It's Maxx Crosby. And you can sit up here, you can say what you want, but Maxx Crosby was on his podcast and confirmed every single report that Ian Rappaport put out. And Max even himself said anything would be on the table if the Raiders don't keep AP. I can promise you this, Max right now is not a very happy camper based off of the fact that Antonio Pierce has not been hired yet. And if you think about Max, right, a player that has put his heart, his soul, everything on the line for this organization, has told Mark Davis face-to-face, has told on a podcast, has stood up and made his preach of, I want Antonio Pierce. And if Mark Davis goes behind Maxx Crosby's back, I'm telling you right now, he's out. Max is not going to be back this season, nor would I really blame the guy. And it sucks to say because Max is everything that I want in a Raider. I know he's got it tattooed on him, but it comes a certain point where you're just fed up, right? You're just fed up. Like, same thing with family. I have a lot of really close family members that, guess what? Sometimes we don't talk to them anymore. Why? Because at every single point, people get fed up. And right now, you're right here with Maxx Crosby. If you don't hire AP, I'm honestly thinking that's going to be the tipping point. Can I get some 98s down below? And for everyone's like, oh, but he's under contract. He doesn't have to get traded because Mark can decline it. What if Max doesn't play? I mean, what if Max doesn't play? You're only wasting his trade value. Let's go to another player. If Maxx Crosby gets traded, you know who's the next guy to go? It's Davante Adams. And then when this happens, you go from full-on rebuild mode. I'm not talking a normal rebuild. I'm talking you're hoping that the Raiders were able to put together a few wins because all the players that are the big-name players, see ya. Goodbye. We're trading you because they're not going to want to stick around. And Davante has made it clear. He has already shown his frustrations. He also has said that he wants the Raiders to hire Antonio Pierce. So Maxx Crosby's gone. Davante Adams is gone. The number one player that I am the most confident that would end up getting traded if Antonio Pierce is not retained by the Raiders is Jack Jones at corner. The Raiders brought in Jones, and I'd say it worked out pretty damn well, right? And this is kind of one of the reasons why I get frustrated with fans on social media that are like, how can you trust Antonio Pierce to make the right decisions? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the Raiders got better as a team overall, and the players that the Raiders brought in underneath Antonio Pierce's tutelage, guess what? I mean, it worked out pretty damn well. Jack Jones was a castaway. Nobody wanted him. And then guess what? AP said, I got him, and then ended up being a good player. I promise you this, Jack Jones will not play for the Las Vegas Raiders unless Antonio Pierce is the head coach of this team. So those are the 3 players. But what's even more important on that is if Maxx Crosby says, I want out, if Davante Adams says, I want out, if Jack Jones is heading out the door, the NFL GMs are like sharks. They're going to smell blood in the water. And what does that mean? Might as well you just say it's a yard sale. When teams know players want out, the draft capital is not as much. Like, I believe that the Raiders would want 3 first-round picks at minimum for Maxx Crosby. If Antonio Pierce is not the guy, you might get 2. If Davante Adams then sees that, you might get 1. Jack Jones, let's say you get a 6th-round pick. So you're telling me 3 firsts and a 6th-round pick is good enough for Maxx Crosby, Davante Adams, and Jack Jones? And all due respect, you can go F yourself because I don't think that that's good enough value for arguably the best defensive player in the NFL, arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL, and a corner that played his freaking dick off this season for the Raiders. So coming up here is going to be my opinion on Mike Vrabel because I've heard a lot of people talk about Vrabel, and I'm not going to sit up here and defend Vrabel. I will tell you this, though. I think that he's a good coach. I do. And I think anybody that says that he's not a good coach, they're just lying to themselves. I want AP more, but I'll kind of get in here a little bit more on Vrabel. For those that do not know, Jeremy Chugs and I, we're going to be live for the Bills-Chiefs game. Can I get a few FKCs down below? I know the Raiders aren't playing anymore on game days, but as far as I'm concerned, every single team that goes up against Kansas City, That's my favorite team that day, minus the Raiders, right? So let's go Buffalo. I hope they get a dub. Tune in. We're going to be going live an hour before kickoff. And the giveaway item that I got is going to get some chuckles. I know that. All right, so let's get into this here around Mike Vrabel. I do think that he's a good coach. But Antonio Pierce is more proven with this Raiders team than him. Like, I kind of laugh out loud when people are like, oh, Antonio Pierce can't be the head coach, but we should hire Mike Vrabel. We should hire Jim Harbaugh. I get it. Their resumes are better, but their resumes are over here. They have better resumes in this area. Antonio Pierce has the better resume with the Raiders, and anybody that doesn't think that, I mean, it's a fact. Antonio Pierce has the best resume and the best track record with this current Raiders team. So my take on this is every NFL coach was once not experienced enough to get the job. Antonio Pierce proved he made the Raiders better. What more do you want from the guy? I mean, it's an honest question. At the end of the day, did he make the Raiders better? Yes, he did. He made the Raiders a better football team. And, for everyone saying he's not qualified enough, you're right, he's not qualified enough. Guess what, though? I wasn't qualified enough at one point. Jeremy wasn't qualified enough at one point. You were not qualified enough at one point in your job. But you know what? Somebody gave you a chance, and I'm willing to give AP a chance. So coming up here, I wanted to get into this coaches that remind me of AP because I get it. He's never been the head coach. But, I always like to do NFL comps when I look at quarterbacks, right? Like, I'll always give a comp when I talk about Drake May, when I talk about Caleb Williams, because I think it's a little bit easier for people to be able to wrap their minds around. And to me, there are 5 coaches that remind me of Antonio Pierce. The first guy is Dan Campbell. And what he has been able to do for the Detroit Lions is phenomenal work. And the qualities that I see in Dan Campbell are the same qualities that I see in Antonio Pierce is Dan Campbell is a motivator. So for anybody that says he's not going to be a good head coach because AP's just a motivator, watch Dan Campbell. That dude is a motivator, but guess what? Players love playing for him. And it's easy to be motivated on Sunday. But you know why Dan Campbell's as good as what he is? Because those guys show up and they play for him on their off days, at practice on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, whatever it is, they show up because they've built an awesome family atmosphere, basically what the Raiders had at the end of the season. And it's easy to show up on game day, but what makes teams elite, what makes teams Super Bowl caliber teams in the NFL, and are teams that do it every single day, 365. Let's go to another coach here that reminds me of Antonio Pierce. I'm going to go with Mike Tomlin. And the reason why I'm going to go with Mike Tomlin is because when I listen to Mike Tomlin talk, I listen. And I'm a big believer when Mike Tomlin speaks, when he takes that podium, he commands an audience. And maybe it's just because I had to listen to Josh McDaniels it for 2.5 years, essentially. When Antonio Pierce steps up to that podium, when he talks, he commands an audience. Everybody stops what they're doing, and they listen to him. That type of leadership quality and that type of being able to, communicate what you want, that translates onto a football field. You're going to have at one point 90 grown men, 90 potential millionaires in the room at one time. Guess what? You need somebody that can stand up in front of them and command that audience, or else you're just listening on deaf ears. Let's go to the next person that he reminds me of, DeMeco Ryans. One of the reasons why I like the idea of bringing in AP is the exact same reason why I think a guy like DeMeco Ryans and a guy like my next candidate is going to end up being a good head coach. He's a proven player. And you've heard Davante Adams, Josh Jacobs, Maxx Crosby. They talk a lot about this idea of why they like Antonio Pierce because they know what it's like being a player. DeMeco Ryans, he gives off days all the time to some of his veterans, right? That's what Chugs was telling me. And when you think about that, you're like, okay, like this guy's been here, he's done that. Not only has he been here, he's done that, he's had a lot of success as a player, and he's had a lot of success on organizations in that front office or coaching staff area. So player, you can have that conversation. It's a lot easier to understand what exactly is going on with your team. The next dude, Gerard Mayo. Gerard Mayo's a tough mother effer. Like, Gerard Mayo brings it, and I know he's the Patriots head coach. I get it. But you know what? Watch that interview that Mayo does with Robert Kraft. And even though Robert Kraft's the owner of that team, just watch some of the things that Gerard Mayo says there. He tells you how it is. And I think that's what good organizations do. That's what good leaders do. It might not be what you want to hear, but that's how I feel in that exact moment. That's what Antonio Pierce does. And he is so well respected throughout the entirety of the NFL. And then the last name might surprise some people. It's Mike Vrabel. Like, why are we going to hire Mike Vrabel when I think the type of coach that Antonio Pierce is probably going to end up being and modeling himself after? Not exactly, but it's going to be Vrabel. And one of the things that I see in a lot of Mike Vrabel-led teams is exactly what I saw in the Raiders this entire season. They played for their head coach. I mean, you look at those Titans teams. They played hard-nosed football. They gave 110%, even on days that, they didn't have the most talent out there. They played a tough football game every day. But so did the Raiders underneath Antonio Pierce. So if you're looking for what qualities do you see, Mitch, in Antonio Pierce that makes you so confident that he's the right guy, I just told you. Those are the 5 qualities of why I think Antonio Pierce is going to be a slam dunk for the Las Vegas Raiders. So how about this? Is there a coach AP reminds you of? Like this morning, man, I was on the Twitter streets. If you haven't followed me yet, hit me up at MitchellRenz365. But I was hooting and hollering at people, right? And at the end of the day, I get it. I just want to win. I get that's what everybody else just wants too. But what I want to know is, give me a coach that Antonio Pierce reminds you of. That way, let me do a little bit more research, and then maybe I can give another comp. Maybe there's a better comp out there, and then we can tell the nation to just calm everybody else down a little bit, because I get it. He doesn't have a resume yet. Nobody starts with a resume, though. You got to start somewhere, and to me, this seems like the right opportunity and the right fit for Antonio Pierce. Now, before we wrap up today's show, again, we will be live this upcoming Sunday for Chiefs up against the Buffalo Bills. So hopefully you guys pull up. We're going to have a really awesome giveaway. And if anything ends up happening around Antonio Pierce, around Champ Kelly, I will be live on the show. Do I know when? No. Nobody knows when the hell it's going to happen. I hope it happens now. That didn't happen right now. It would be awesome if it did. But when it does, we'll be live here on the Raiders Report, and I don't want you to miss it.